on to our next story. I'm going to give you a little bit of laughter here when we start this story because I thought it was pretty funny. You know, there's a lot of people on the interwebs right now talking about how third-party candidates and also people that are primary challenging Joe Biden are spoiler candidates, how it's basically a vote for Donald Trump. You're going to help Trump win, that kind of scenario. It's really interesting considering the fact that Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, has already announced that there will be no primary debates for those competitors. So it's really, really interesting when you think about it. And even though that has been said, RFK Jr. is preparing for the debates. So get ready for this one. Some of you are not on Twitter, so I know you haven't seen it probably. But RFK Jr. is saying he is already getting in shape for his debate with President Biden. You got to see this, and I'm going to tell you, this is going somewhere, I promise. RFK Jr. tweeted, "Getting in shape for my debates with President Biden." This cracked me up, guys. You got to see this to believe it.
Okay. Let's go. That's a fit boy. Okay. Let's go.
We'll go to the thread after this. This is funny. Stop.
That's a fit boy.
I gotta say this. First and foremost. First, I thought it was funny because I was like, is this for real? Two, I was also shocked because I said, I didn't know RFK Jr. was ripped like that. Like, I seriously, like, JB, I think, was the one who sent me the picture, and then someone sent me the video, and I was like, I didn't know that RFK Jr. had all those muscles underneath that suit. So, like, I didn't know, so this just shocked me, right? So he goes on to say, this is pretty interesting. By the way, this has millions of views, as you can imagine. He goes on to say, as president, I will restore America as the global example of health and well-being, not through pills or syringes, but through character and self-discipline. And I will continue to walk the walk and lead by example. He goes on, he talks about the pandemics. I'm going to skip that because it's YouTube. Sorry. He goes on to say, conversely, we must never allow ourselves to succumb to fear. Fear disabled both the immune system and the capacity for critical thought, which is key to the survival of democracy. We will restore our health as we reunite our communities and build our nation. So start doing your morning calisthenics, everybody. Get yourself in shape for the Kennedy presidency. Kudos to Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg for setting a physical fitness example for Americans with the Octagon Challenge. P.S. And yes, I can do more than 10 push-ups. That was my last set. And Paul said, why would anyone do 8.5 push-ups? He said, final set. So RFK Jr. is preparing for a debate. He wants to debate Joe Biden. Marianne wants to debate Joe Biden. Cornel West wants to debate Joe Biden. But there are people out there that feels this shouldn't happen at all. They shouldn't be running. You shouldn't support them. And one of those people is a platform actually called Pod Save America. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Pod Save America discussing voter shaming as a strategy. Hold on to your seats for this one. They even say the quiet part out loud.
If the people who voted for Jill Stein, just Jill Stein in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania had voted for Hillary instead, Donald Trump would have never become president. That's it, right? And so, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of Cornel West fans out there. You live in a swing state, you vote for Cornel West, you're helping Trump become president. That's it. And you can say, oh, well, it's Joe Biden's fault. He did this or that. No. It's your decision. You get to decide whether you want to help Donald Trump become president or you don't. And if you want to help him, then you should vote for Cornel West, or you should vote for Joe Manchin and his no labels ticket, or you can vote for, RFK Jr. if he decides to run third party. But if you don't want to help Trump become president, you got to vote for Joe Biden. That's it. Very simple. Now, I think messaging to voters who might actually make this decision is probably a little different, I would say, because
No, chastising works.
Yeah. Like, I do think you need to explain why these candidates would not be good candidates for president. I really do, because I think we could get tripped up in that, because I think if you are one of these voters and you hear a bunch of people yelling at you to vote for Joe Biden and because you have to, I don't think it's going to be very effective. And I think you have to say why RFK Jr. is not a good choice, why Cornel West is not a good choice, why Joe Manchin, or whoever it may be, is not a good choice. So that is something that I think Democrats are going to have to figure out in the next year. Finally,
let's chime in here. Let's hear this again. Let's chime in.
If the people who voted for Jill Stein, just Jill Stein, in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania had voted for Hillary instead, Donald Trump would have never become president.
No. Let's talk about how this works. You see, we've had this discussion. We had a third-party summit over at RBN. We had this discussion with Jill Stein and with other people that have run third party and vote third party. That is actually not true. This idea that the third party candidates pull people from the Democratic Party, Jill Stein has said this so herself, that's actually not true. Historically, that's not true. The people who voted for Jill Stein wanted to vote for Jill Stein. The people who voted for Hillary Clinton want Hillary Clinton, or they were afraid of Donald Trump, right? And the people who voted for Donald Trump wanted Donald Trump. He mentions Wisconsin. He mentions Michigan, but he leaves out the part that Hillary Clinton did not campaign in the Rust Belt. Why should the people in the Rust Belt support a candidate that basically felt like she didn't even have the time to give them when she was running her race in the first damn place? Think about that. So this whole idea that it's Jill Stein's fault, no. Because you know what would have happened? Those people that voted for Jill Stein, if there was no Jill Stein or no other third-party candidate, they would have stayed home. And I know because I've had this conversation multiple times. Those people would have stayed home. If they wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton, they would have voted for her. You see what they try to do? Let's go on.
That's it, right? And so, I'm sure there's a lot of Cornel West fans out there. You live in a swing state, you vote for Cornel West, you're helping Trump become president.
What are the swing states? Let's talk about this for a second, guys. They like to bring this up. Once upon a time, they used to say that Florida was a swing state. I wouldn't say that's the case anymore. Florida's red. Some people push North Carolina as a swing state. North Carolina is not a swing state. It went blue that one time since I've been alive for 2008 for Obama, and then it went back red again. What are the swing states they're referring to? Maybe a state like Pennsylvania, right? So this is them trying to voter shame people that, well, if you support Jill Stein, someone like Jill Stein or Cornel West or whatever, then you're giving this vote to Donald Trump. No, you're giving the vote to the person that you vote for. And this idea that you should only be participating in two parties, this sort of binary way of thinking, it's draconian and it's old. It's 2023. We're one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have more than two parties. Canada has more parties. Like, this doesn't make any sense, people. So you have Pod Save America here, which, by the way, totally crapped on Bernie Sanders' campaign. Totally smeared Bernie Sanders. And this is the podcast that AOC chose to go on to this year, by the way. The podcast that shamed Bernie Sanders voters. You see what I mean? It's not even just about the third party for them. It's also about anyone who's voting for the people that are not a part of that status quo. These three dudes on Pod Save America are there to make sure that the status quo remains in place. That's their job. Let's continue.
That's it. And you can say, oh, well, it's Joe Biden's fault. He did this or that. No. It's your decision. You get to decide whether you want to help Donald Trump become president or you don't.
So here he is carrying weight for Joe Biden. You can say, well, it's Joe Biden's fault. Well, he did this and this. And he said, no, it's your decision. So he wants you to totally just forget about everything that Joe Biden has done wrong and vote for him anyway, because otherwise you'll end up with someone like Donald Trump. He's blaming the voter. And the Democratic Party is totally behind this podcast, by the way. These Pod Save Americas, these people are just shills for the Democratic Party. They're there to keep you in the Democratic Party. There's a reason why they can get certain people to come on their show that we could never get to come on here, because they go with the status quo. And that's what the Democratic Party likes. These guys are pretty well off, right? They want you to keep doing the same thing so that they have a show. Did I say the quiet part out loud? They want you to keep doing the same thing so that they still have a show. Think about that. Doesn't matter with me. It doesn't matter with me. If you vote Democrat, you vote third party, I'll still be here because I cover news and interviews. My job is not to keep you in a Democratic Party. So it's all connected, all of it. And they're here to voter shame people. It is people like him and that podcast that have actually pulled people away from the Democratic Party more so than I have with that talking point. That whack ass talking point. It's your fault. Keep voter shaming people. How did that work out? 2016, how did it work out? How did it work out for Hillary Clinton to call people deplorables? Did that work in her favor? No. Think about this, people. Think about this.
And if you want to help him, then you should vote for Cornel West, or you should vote for Joe Manchin and his no labels ticket, or you can vote for, RFK Jr. if he decides to run third party. But if you don't want to help Trump become president, you got to vote for Joe Biden.
And that's the narrative that they're going to be using. That's the narrative that they're going to use. If you don't want to help Trump, you better vote for Joe Biden. Man, fuck all this. I'm not even sure I should be afraid of Donald Trump, like with all this nonsense. They actually make it seem like Trump is like this notorious figure that is just going to be the most evil thing. We already had Trump. We already had Joe Biden. I prefer neither. And you, as a voter, should have the opportunity to vote neither. And this is what happens when the Democratic Party and the Republican Party give you candidates that people don't fucking want. This is what happens when the Democratic Party sits up here and continues to make promises to people only to renege once they're in office. This is what happens, people. This is what happens when the current administration that you have in office right now, people are making less now than they were before. Financially, the number of people told me they were better off financially when Trump was in office versus now with Joe Biden. Come on, people, wake up. Wake up. So he can sit there really smug and tell you you're supporting Donald Trump if you do this. He's fine. Fine. He don't need any type of radical change in his life. He didn't even want, again, they smeared Bernie Sanders' campaign. What'd that tell you? And Bernie ran through the Democratic Party. So it's not even just about the third party issue.
That's it. Very simple. Now, I think messaging to voters who might actually make this decision is probably a little different, I would say, because
No, chastising works.
Yeah.
You see, it's funny. It's all fun and games to them. Chastising works. Mm-hmm.
Like, I do think you need to explain why these candidates would not be good candidates for president. I really do, because
if you need to explain to people why these candidates would not be good candidates, if you actually believe that I am going to sit here and believe that Joe Biden is a better president than Cornel West would be, or even RFK Jr. I disagree with him on the Israel-Palestine thing. We know we can't rock with that. And I disagree with him running the Democratic Party. But if you actually sit up here and think that I believe that Joe Biden would be a better president, this guy can barely talk, guys. Joe Biden's falling down on the stage, forgetting people's names, and they want you to believe that Joe Biden would be better? This is a psyop. How much is the DNC paying these guys? How much? You see what they got to do? They really got to try, because Joe Biden is so damn horrible. They got to get Pause Save America on board. They got to get the teenage boys on Twitter telling people Gen Z really knows what's up and Joe Biden is where it's at. Like all this whack shit. Nobody's falling for this shit. Wake up, people. A hot mess.
And I think we could get tripped up in that, because I think if you are one of these voters and you hear a bunch of people yelling at you to vote for Joe Biden and because you have to, I don't think it's going to be very effective. And I think you have to say why RFK Jr. is not a good choice, why Cornel West is not a good choice, why Joe Manchin or whoever it may be is not a good choice. So that is something that I think Democrats are going to have to figure out in the next.
Why is Joe Biden a good choice? He's not. I really do believe these people, like I said, they're a hot mess. Oz came in here and said these clowns are so personable yet so pathetic, spewing vomit for the very entities they are systemically killing us all. Darwin is blushing. There's Notori. Notori comes in and says Pause Save America is the arm of the DNC and a hack job and a CIA agent. Let's not forget that this lame, whack-ass mofos came out of the Barack Obama administration. Bingo. And it goes on. Because even MSNBC, they're also playing into this whole fringe candidate issue, why they're going to be problematic for Joe Biden. Shout out to Case Study QB also for this clip as well. See, they're getting nervous. You know why they're afraid, right? You know why they're afraid? They're afraid because Joe Biden's polling so horribly, and they're afraid because the majority of Democrats are saying they don't want Joe Biden.
As the 2024 presidential primary race starts to heat up, some fringe candidates are already gaining momentum. In a new article for Vanity Fair, our guest Mark McKinnon writes that presidential hopefuls like Marianne Williamson, RFK Jr., and Cornel West might seem like pesky, small-time tormentors, but in reality, they're seasoned, self-assured, and camera-ready candidates.
Look at this. She's talking about Cornel West, Marianne. RFK said, while it appears they may be pesky, small-time tormentors. You see what the problem is, right? They weren't chosen by the establishment. The establishment didn't choose them. When you're not chosen, you're pesky. You're a tormentor. I would actually apply those words to Joe Biden right now. I would consider him to be pesky. I would consider him to be a tormentor. Maybe he should step down. Maybe he's the spoiler candidate and ruin it for everybody else.
And they were already stealing buzz from Trump and Biden. Bob Torselli and Mark McKinnon, the author, are still with us. Mark, how big of a threat are these fringe candidates to the current frontrunners? Because if you're perusing Twitter these days, there's a whole bunch of alpha macho men riding RFK like he is secretariat these days, and they think he is the voice of the future.
Yeah.
So now they're going to use the fringe and the misogynist. They're going to apply the, watch, this is coming. Mark my words. So she said macho guys defending RFK Jr. What's going to come after that later on? They're going to try to say that RFK Jr.'s fans are misogynistic. Watch. Mark my words. Check back in with me next year. Watch. Because this is the kind of level, the angle that they took with Bernie Sanders. So just keep that in mind. and they're calling them fringe candidates. They can't just be candidates. They have to be called fringe. No democracy in this country.
Yeah, well, there's two ways to run in politics, scared and unopposed. So the better way to run is scared when you have these fringe candidates out there, because one thing we know is that the media pours a vacuum, and they also hate a rerun, right? So they're going to look for any conflict, any place where there's a storyline. And as I mentioned in the piece, those three may be fringe candidates, but they're seasoned people. They're articulate. They have interesting, if maybe out there, ideas that the media is going to gobble up. And there's some interesting things coming down the line that I think are specific to this election that are going to provide even more oxygen for those candidates. And I mean specifically the fact that Joe Biden has decided to skip Iowa and New Hampshire, go to South Carolina as the first primary. Well, that means that those three and perhaps others who may yet get in are going to suck up a lot of media attention and oxygen during those critical months when that's where all the media are going to be.
That's his dumbass fault. That's the DNC's fault. That's what they get for changing the primary schedule.
I think, first of all, it's an enormous mistake of Joe Biden to skip Iowa and New Hampshire. So I agree with Mark. It's going to create a platform and an opening which otherwise would not exist. It may be that none of these candidates at the moment have enormous followings and seem like credible threats, but Pat Buchanan, after all, did get George W. elected, and Bill Clinton, Woodrow Wilson, a host of other people became president because of third-party candidates. I would take it seriously in the White House. Joe Biden is going to win or lose the presidency by 2 or 3 percentage points.
Okay, so that's the first clip, and then the second one is here. Let me just get this one queued up for you as well. All right.
A fringe of a fringe can decide this election.
Mark, you write about the possibility of unity candidates in 2024, and
I just want to add in this part about the fringe thing. They use the word fringe as if it's a negative term. Some of us don't see fringe as negative. And I'm going to tell you, you keep using the word fringe, like if mainstream, especially if older adults will consider that to be a negative thing, younger people will eat that shit up. I remember this when I was in the 90s, like, oh God, no, don't listen to that gangster rap music. It's so bad. Really? Let me see what they're talking about. Younger people would love that shit. If you're going around saying, oh, fringe candidate, they're so far on the outside. They're not the norm. They're not usual. Great. Let me check them out and see what they're talking about. That could actually work against them by using that term. You think they would have learned after Trump ran in 2016, but they really have not learned anything.
even called Gretchen Whitmer and Mitt Romney the bipartisan dream ticket. A, dream for who? And B, how would that even happen?
Well, listen, absolutely improbable, but possible. There's a scenario here where an organization, No Labels, is creating a pathway for a third-party unity ticket that would occur if we got to next May, and if Trump were the nominee. And No Labels has made it very clear the whole point that they're doing this is to make sure that Trump's not the next president. But if you had a situation where Trump was the nominee and Biden were, for whatever reason, in bad shape, whether it's a health crisis or economic crisis or whatever it might be. And you know, listen, I'm a Joe Biden fan. I supported him. But I don't think he's going to be better at 80 a year from now than he is today. And that's why most of the country doesn't think anybody should be president at 80. But he's running, and he's got a good record to run on. But if he gets to that point next spring and he's down double digits to Donald Trump, all bets at that point will be off. And No Labels will have created ballot access in perhaps 50 states, but they've already established it in a lot, but let's say 40, 45, 50 states.
How is No Labels? We need to ask this question. How are they creating ballot access in all these states that quickly? Because people who have worked third parties, Green Party, they'll tell you, Libertarian Party, they'll tell you that it takes time to get ballot access. How are they, this organization, how are they able to just get ballot access in all these states that quickly? People need to start asking that question. And two, if they actually think that someone like Gretchen Whitmer and Mitt Romney, like seriously, give me a break. If they really think that is going to win, especially young people over. I don't see too many young people shilling for Mitt Romney, boo. I don't see too many young people shilling for Mitt Romney. They see him as out of touch. They feel like he is not up to date with the times. I don't see them really going for them. And remember, it was Gen Z who actually helped Democrats win in November in the midterms. So good luck with that.
And they'll put together a unity ticket. At that point, pick your brackets. I mean, you can pick your own favorite pairings. And at that point, if Biden's in that bad a shape, I think Democrats will be released to put up interesting candidates. So, I like Whitmer. I like Whitmer Romney, but I like Cheney, Buttigieg. Take your pick.
Listen to the people they're mentioning. Cheney and Buttigieg. Didn't Liz Cheney vote against LGBTQ rights? Now, she may have come around on that issue later on, but look at how they just lump people together. Liz Cheney, Democratic Party all of a sudden loves Liz Cheney now because she stood up to Donald Trump. Give me a break. Give me a break. But you can't organize with people on the right. You can't get out into the street and march for Medicare for all, for health care, for anti-war rallies. You can't do that, but they can put someone on the right on a ticket with a Democrat, and you're supposed to just accept that. They put Liz Cheney with Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg, black people don't like you. I'm sorry, didn't we learn this already in 2020? Pete Buttigieg, these people would struggle, particularly having lived down south. Pete gonna struggle in South Carolina just like he did last time. Liz, just get out of here with this. Anything. Basically, they want people to come in that will maintain the status quo. That's what this is really about. Now, I want to go back to 2016, and I want to remind you of something. Oftentimes, we hear people mention Jill Stein. It's Jill Stein, 2016. She did this, she did that, yada, yada. People often forget about Gary Johnson. People act like there wasn't another third-party candidate that ran. Gary Johnson, if you guys remember, he ran on the Libertarian ticket, right? The Libertarian Party, they have pretty good ballot access. In fact, let me go ahead and pull this up here, because there's one piece here that I want to show you in particular. Not foreign policy, polling. Listen to this. The Libertarian Party conducted presidential primaries in only a few states. All delegates to the Libertarian National Convention were unpledged, meaning that they could vote for the candidate of their choice. In pre-nomination preference polls conducted by state Libertarian parties, Johnson won first place in most states preceding the Libertarian National Convention at the end of May. So that's important to note. The general election. In late September 2016, Johnson's support was placed at 8.6% by Real Clear Politics, average of presidential polls, and at 7.9% by 538 polls only forecasting model. Johnson's highest polling nationally to date has been 13% against Clinton and Trump. But notice how most of these outlets never mention Gary Johnson. Why is that? Why do they only mention Jill Stein? Need to start asking that question. There's more. A Washington Post SurveyMonkey 50-state poll was conducted online between August 9th and September 1st, found that Gary Johnson was polling at 10% or higher in 42 states and at 15% or higher in 15 states. Johnson received 25% in his home state of New Mexico and Utah. See, I just want to remind people about this because I got tired of people just pretending like Jill Stein was the only third-party candidate. And there's more. So they go into the debates there. That's not the part I wanted to go to. I didn't want to go into that either. Sorry. Let me go back up. But I thought that piece was very interesting. This part right here. Johnson and Weld formed the first ticket of any party to feature two governors since 1948 presidential election. They received 3.3% of the vote, totaling nearly 4.5 million, dwarfing Johnson's 2012 popular vote total and making the Libertarians the most successful presidential run to date and the most successful third-party candidacy since Ross Perot in 1996. But nobody talks about this. Just bringing you back there. Now, let's fast forward. Let's go to 2020. I want to show you something because I think this is important for people to see. When we look at the votes, presidential election results 2020, look at this. So we got Biden, Trump, Joe Jorgensen, Howie Hawkins, and then we have like Alliance, PSL. We're just going to focus on Green, Libertarian, Republican, Democrat right now because they have the most, right? So again, when we look at 2020, we had Joe Jorgensen paired with Spike Cohen, and we had in the Green Party, Howie Hawkins paired with Angela Walker. Have you guys noticed something? Notice how you don't seem to hear them complain about these third-party candidates that ran in 2020. You know why? Because Joe Biden won. Because the Democratic Party won. If Trump would have won, then you would have heard them complaining about them. But I want to show you how well they did because people may not realize. Now look at this. If we're looking at Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen, right? Just in Arizona, remember Arizona was one of those states, right? They got over 50,000 votes. Third party, they got over 50,000 votes. California, they came away with over 180,000. Let's look at the total. Let's go all the way down because I want to show you something. Texas, they got over 100,000. You see this? Over 126,000 votes. Altogether, Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen got over 1 million votes. Almost 2 million. If we pivot to the column here, this is the Green Party column. So this is Howie Hawkins and this is Angela Walker. They didn't get even 500,000 votes. What that tells me is the Libertarian Party, I believe they do have more ballot access than the Green Party does. But what I'm trying to show you guys is that these people should not be counted out. And they're talking about swing states. So let's look at a state. Which one was the swing state? Pennsylvania. Let's look at Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen got almost 80,000 votes, right? So this is one of the states that they say the third party would ruin it for. Did that ruin it for Biden? No, it didn't. You see what I'm saying? Look at this. And it was still really close between Biden and Trump. Let's go to another one. Let's go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin, Libertarian, they got over 38,000 votes. Did that stop Biden from winning Wisconsin? No, it didn't. Aaron said Libertarian Party had full ballot access, only one of the third parties. This explains a lot. Yeah. So, but the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that when people make these comments, they're like, oh, well, these people should matter or those third parties should matter. No, they should matter. So look at that. And people should also not overlook the Libertarian Party. Look at how well they did. They outperformed Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. But again, like I said, you don't hear them make those the comments they make about Jill Stein. You don't hear them make those comments about Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker because Joe Biden won. If Joe Biden would have lost, they would make those comments about Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. The next time someone approaches you with that narrative, bring up the 2020 election with Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker. Bring that up. Just wanted to point that out. I'm going to go to some of these comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Philosophical. I think Trump ended up pardoning more Black people than Obama. Might be pulling that number out of my butt, though. I think he actually did. Thank you, Fancy Pants. Didn't Cube go on Bad Faith? I never saw Ice Cube on Bad Faith. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. Thank you, Philosophical. We're so back, bros. I hope RFK Jr. personally gives every Washington, D.C. nerd an atomic wedgie. Thank you, David. Funny how binary thinking isn't accepted these days in everything except politics. That's where you only have two choices. Thank you, Janice. 11% of Trump's vote came from registered Democrats, and there's that. Thank you, Jessica. They are all Obama's old staff. It says it on their website. See, there you guys go. I told you. I told you. Thank you. None of your business. Next time on Gas or Food Liner, think is Biden better? Thank you, Roger. Sounds like Steph Rule is getting fire for RFK herself. Thank you, Space. I can see why RFK Jr. sees Israel's side because a Palestinian took the life of his father over his father, even with he is not a hardcore supporter. But when he was asked about that from the rabbi, when he was asked about that, he said he didn't believe that person took his life. The Sion took his father's life. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm confused. Thank you, DC, who let the dogs out. Thank you, Marcus. Did you see that Warren has joined the race? The cringe is so real. Hashtag Cornel West 2024. I did not see that. I'm not sure if she did. I think they've been putting people's names in polls that haven't even decided to run. She's ridiculous. Forget her with all that. Thank you, Chelsea. As a woman living in a red state, Trump isn't that scary anymore. We already lost SCOTUS. Protecting the courts was the only reason I voted for the Democrats. Damage done. Why should I ever support the Dems again? Again, hashtag vote green. See? Thank you, DC. As a two-time Libertarian Party delegate and early member of the Libertarian Socialist Caucus of the LP, I can assure you that the LP national conventions and primaries are just as rigged as the red and blue ones. Interesting. Thank you, Philip. Trump is the lesser of two evils. I'm glad I get to vote for Cornell. That's an interesting statement. That's interesting.